It probably won't come as a surprise to you that in the Middle Ages, the average life expectancy was a lot lower than it is today. I mean, it makes sense when you consider all the warring and disease, and not to mention the torture and capital punishment. We might expect to hear that a medieval died on the battlefield or because of the plague. However, there are also some medieval deaths that are a little on the bizarre side.
What you gonna do?
So let's travel back in time now to the Middle Ages and take a look at some of the more strange and stupid ways to die. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Horsing around, Louis III of France. Louis was born around 865, the eldest son of Louis the Stammerer and Ansgard of Burgundy. His father was King of Aquitaine and later the King of West Francia. When he died, Louis the Younger's short reign was plagued with questions about his legitimacy because his parents had married in secret. This meant that Louis had to rule alongside his brother Carloman II, as many refused to recognize him as the true king. After Viking raids became a problem in the Frankish kingdoms, Louis and his brother ambushed the raiders at Saucourt in the summer of 881. The fighting was bloody, but according to the Annals of Fulda, the West Franks slaughtered around 9,000 Vikings and were victorious. At just 16, Louis was a hero among his people, and the poem Ludwigslied was written to celebrate his piety and bravery in battle. When he was about 17 in the following August, it wasn't a Viking that killed Louis, but rather his love for a young lady. They were both on horseback, and Louis was chasing her when she decided to ride home to her father's house. Louis followed, but smacked his head on the lintel of a low archway. He fell from his horse and died from a cracked skull. His brother was unsuccessful in his war against the Vikings, and he died in a hunting accident just 2 years later. Well, hunting accident is putting it kindly. His servant stabbed him in the leg by mistake when they were attacked by a wild boar. Caught in the act, Basil I. Basil was a Byzantine emperor during the 9th century, but he wasn't born into royalty. Basil, born a Macedonian peasant, worked his way up through the imperial court after becoming a favourite of Emperor Michael III. It was around 865 that Michael ordered Basil to divorce his wife and marry Eudokia Ingerina, Emperor Michael's favourite mistress. A year later, Michael made Basil co-emperor. In 866, Basil, who was jealous of another courtier, planned Michael's assassination and placed himself on the throne as sole ruler, the first of the Macedonian dynasty. Despite his humble upbringing, Basil was a successful and well-respected monarch who improved laws and achieved military success. After an effective 19-year reign, Basil died in the summer of 886. According to the Vita Euthymii, Basil was hunting deer in Thrace when, quote, "He was giving chase alone, for his companions were tired, but the stag, seeing him isolated, turned in his flight and charged, trying to gore him. He threw his spear, but the stag's antlers were in the way, and it glanced off useless to the ground. The emperor, now finding himself helpless, took to flight, but the deer, pursuing, struck at him with its antlers, with the result that it carried him off. For the tips of the antlers having slipped under his belt, the stag lifted him from his horse and bore him away. And no one knew this had happened till they saw the horse riderless." Basil was dragged through the woods for 16 miles before an attendant stopped the deer and cut him loose with a knife.
Stop!
The emperor believed that the servant was trying to assassinate him and had the man executed shortly before Basil succumbed to his injuries and died. What goes around, Hatto II. So legend says Hatto was Archbishop of Mainz. Now Mainz is a German city, but in the 10th century it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Hatto is said to have done some good things during his life, like building a church, donating money to the upkeep of a couple of abbeys, and patronizing the Carolingian chronicler Regino of Prome. However, he was also known as a cruel man who oppressed the peasants under his rule. There was a small tower set on an island in the Rhine. Hatto placed archers and crossbowmen on the tower so that he could demand monies from any passing ships. In 974, there was a famine in the area. Hatto stored all the grain in his barns and only sold it to the starving peasants at high prices, which most of them couldn't afford. The peasants naturally were angry, and fearing a rebellion, Hatto promised to feed them. He told them to meet him at one of the barns where he would give them grain. However, when they got there, the barn was empty. They waited inside. Hatto arrived and ordered his men to shut and bar the doors before setting fire to the barn and burning everyone inside to death. As the people screamed, Hatto laughed and said, "Hear the mice squeak!" Later, Hatto was supposedly set upon by thousands of mice in his tower, where they ate him alive. In Robert Southey's poem, God's Judgment on a Wicked Bishop, he wrote, "They have whetted their teeth against the stones, and now they pick the bishop's bones. They gnawed the flesh from every limb, for they were sent to do judgment on him." The Coup, Edmund Ironside. Edmund II was king of the English and began his short reign in 1016. He was the son of Ethelred the Unready and inherited a war with the Danes from his father, and was given the nickname Ironside because of his bravery in challenging the invasion led by Canute. In 1015, Canute pillaged most of England, and despite Edmund fighting 5 battles against the Danes, he was defeated and had to divide up his kingdom. Keeping Wessex for himself, Edmund agreed that Canute should rule the rest of the country. Edmund died after ruling for only 7 months. After William the Conqueror's invasion of 1066, the German medieval chronicler Adam of Bremen said that he had been poisoned. However, later 12th century writer Henry of Huntingdon said that Edmund was murdered while sitting on the toilet. Quote, "Having occasion to retire to the house for relieving the calls of nature, the son of the alderman Edric concealed himself in the pit and stabbed the king twice from beneath with a sharp dagger, and leaving the weapon fixed in his bowels made his escape." Curiosity killed the king, James II of Scotland. James was born in 1430 and was known as Fiery Face because of his vermilion birthmark. After his father James I was violently murdered, James Jr. ascended to the Scottish throne when he was just 6 years old. His reign was one long round of power struggle as James tried to keep control of his kingdom, and the families of Percy and Douglas feuded around him. After involving himself in the English dynastic struggles that we now call the Wars of the Roses, James was trying to recover Roxburgh Castle when, quote, "This prince, more curious than became him, did stand near hand the gunners when the artillery was discharged. His thigh bone was dung in 2 with a piece of misframed gun that brake in shooting, by the which he was stricken to the ground and died hastily." James was just 29 years old. What's your poison? Sultan Baybars al-Bunduqdari. Commonly known as Baybars, meaning the Great Panther, he was the Mamluk ruler of Syria and Egypt, and was known for his ruthlessness and obsession with holding on to power. Baybars successfully used a network of spies in his quest to keep one step ahead of both the Crusaders and the Mongols. In 1277, his astrologers foretold that a king would soon die of poison. Having just returned from Anatolia, the Sultan was jealous of a popular Ayyubid prince there and believed that in killing the prince it would satisfy the prophecy. So Baybars invited the prince to a feast in Damascus. Baybars put deadly poison in his own goblet and offered it to the prince, who drank deeply. One of Baybars' servants took the goblet from the prince and refilled it. Not knowing that the poison had left its trace in the chalice, he gave it back to Baybars, who drank from it. Having a larger dose of poison meant that the Ayyubid prince died quickly that night, but Baybars suffered in agony for several days before he eventually died, fulfilling the prophecy. Fell down, broke his crown, Béla I of Hungary. Nicknamed the Boxer, Béla was the son of Basil, a Grand Prince of the Hungarians. Basil was kept prisoner and blinded by his cousin King Stephen I in the last years of his reign. After Basil was executed, Béla left Hungary with his brothers Andrew and Levent, but returned after Andrew was crowned King of Hungary in 1046. Béla rebelled against Andrew, who was mortally wounded on the battlefield, and he became King Béla I in 1060. In an attempt to end conflict with the Holy Roman Empire, Béla released German prisoners, but this still didn't appease them. He was just about to abdicate in favour of his nephew Solomon, who enjoyed German support, when, according to the Hungarian Illuminated Chronicle, his throne broke beneath him. The fall must have been a pretty long drop, because Béla, who was said to be half dead from his injuries, died shortly after. Bad Karma, Charles II of Navarre. Charles, known as the Bad, ruled the Kingdom of Navarre that occupied lands on either side of the Western Pyrenees. He was born in 1332, his mother was a princess and his father a count. Charles became King of Navarre in 1349. Also holding land in Normandy, Charles was a major player in the 100 Years' War between France and England and repeatedly switched sides to further his own cause. In 1351, Charles married Joan of Valois, daughter to the French King John II. Despite Charles de Lacerda, the Constable of France, being favourite to the king, Charles the Bad had him assassinated. He plotted with the English to acquire more French lands and created anarchy in Paris when he found out that the English King Edward III and the French King had made peace. Even his death was bad. In 1387, when he was 54 years old, according to Robert Blagdon's book, Paris as it was and as it is, quote, Charles the Bad, having fallen into such a state of decay that he could not make use of his limbs, consulted his physician, who ordered him to be wrapped up from head to foot in a linen cloth impregnated with brandy, so that he might be enclosed in it to the very neck as in a sack. It was night when this remedy was administered. One of the female attendants of the palace, charged to sew up the cloth that contained the patient, having come to the neck, the fixed point where she was to finish her seam, made a knot according to custom. But as there was still remaining an end of thread, instead of cutting it as usual with scissors, she had recourse to the candle, which immediately set fire to the whole cloth. Being terrified, she ran away and abandoned the king, who was thus burnt alive in his own palace. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe if you're enjoying this video, as we do release videos now a couple of times a week, so be sure to hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload a new one. Cheers everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.